All right, let's dissect that a bit more now. So there's been a suggestion that there should be a register for racists following the conviction of a retirement village resident who called a maintenance worker with the K word. So there's also calls for the criminalisation of racism. The Nelson Mandela Foundation Researcher Petronella Nqaba joins me now in studio to talk about this. Very good evening to you, Petronella. Thanks indeed for your time. I mean, we look at what transpired at the Randburg Magistrates Court today with Adam Katsavelis getting a slap on his wrist. We refer to an incident involving a retirement village resident. Not short of another incident, the former COO of Busasa, Angela Wagrizi, and there's also the incident involving Vicky Momberg. Would a racist register work in South Africa? Very much like the pedophile register that we have.
Thank you for that, Griselda. So for us, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, we recognize that racism is, very deeply entrenched and systemic problem that we have in this country. And it stems from a situation where we have a country that has not healed, right? And the reason I'm bringing that up is that it's not clear for us what a register would do to address that. Because what we do have is an imbalance in the power relations between the people in our society that create the conditions that allow people to feel as if they can be racist towards and not recognize the dignity and humanity of others. For us, the work is not around having a register, but rather doing the more programmatic work that recognizes that we need to deal with the institutions, the culture, the narratives, and the policies that allow racism to continue in our society. And a register, from my opinion, will not address that problem.
Perhaps legislation, in my intro earlier said that, there have been calls from certain sections of society to have racism itself criminalized, so that it is considered to be a criminal offense to be racist. And many are arguing that perhaps the reason why you see such instances where you have individuals who others are saying are getting a slap on the wrist for insulting others in this fashion, which is speaks to the indignity that is meted out against certain sections of society. Do you think that perhaps criminalizing racism would be the first way to go?
I think legislation is one tool, but I don't think it's the only tool or a tool that is enough. Because what we're dealing with here is behavioral patterns, and those have not been proven in the past to be simply changed by simply criminalizing something. We need to become more imaginative and much more creative in the ways in which we understand how we're going to move forward from this point and build a South Africa where we're no longer having these conversations.
Help me there then with the behavioral patterns. How do we then change those behavioral patterns among certain sections of society?
Well, for me, it starts with the reduction of inequality and poverty, right? Because you mentioned that this happened under very specific circumstances in a retirement village. You must look at where these instances are happening and the pockets to whom they're happening to. So for me, there's a larger question than just race on its own. It's a whole system and a whole society that has not addressed what it means to actually bring dignity and uphold the humanity of everybody that is a part of our communities.
So who plays a role in that? I mean, of course, society on its own, legislators, and if we're going to talk about dealing with issues of poverty and inequality, some others would argue that we are far off as South Africa in dealing with that. So you're going to have another incident where you have this kind of conduct in the public sphere, and then what happens then?
See, for me, it's going to take everybody. We all have to come to the table. At the moment, it's only, like you were saying, legislators, the people who are mandated to deal with this, whereas we're not looking at it as a whole societal kind of, in our everyday practices. In what ways are we realizing and also checking ourselves around, the narratives that we perpetuate, the ways in which we relate to each other in the workplaces. We're not actually, it's going to take everybody. For me, it's not just a system where we have to look at your legislators, your researchers, the people. It actually means that as South Africans, we're going to have to dig deep and fix what is broken in us, which is, we continue to be a wounded society that has not had time to heal.
Looking at, for example, today's sentencing of Adam Katsavelis, do you think it was fair?
I'm not a legislator.
I know. Yeah. But I think from where you're sitting, I mean, obviously you've got a lot of South Africans there at the moment who are quite were outraged by what had happened, and it's not the first time. So obviously, when it comes to the justice system itself, it also has to play its part somewhere together with everything that you've just said. Do you think that it too can play its part in ensuring there's some kind of deterrent to it happening again? Because we're not going to deal with the issues of inequality and poverty in the next 2 years.
So I think there needs to be some justice. There needs to be a message that is sent out that our society will not tolerate racism in the ways that we're seeing it right now. Whether I don't necessarily think incarceration achieves that.
Sure.
And I go back to my initial response where I was like, we need to become much more imaginative and think through what would restorative justice actually look like. Because at the end of the day, we all have to survive and live together. And incarceration has not proven to change that kind of behavior.
Petronella, thank you very much indeed for coming to the show this evening here on SABC News. Petronella Nqaba, who's with the Nelson Mandela Foundation, she's a researcher there, of course, talking about an array of issues. We've seen quite a number of these incidents in South Africa in recent times. What would be the solution to all of that? We'll have that conversation at another time, I guess, where we can explore it more. Thank you very much indeed, Petronella. Let's see what now sport has in store.